apology. They could shove their apology up their ass. Artemi Panarin definitely looked like he got his mojo back. He got an assist. I was wrong. Big.
And welcome to the final buzzer. I am your host for the night, John Fulkowski. It's been a while since I've done this. So I know it's kind of last minute, but I had some free time. It's actually home for the game, or the home for the ending, I should say. So wanted to do one of these, spend a minute. But Rangers come away. Big 3-2 win in overtime. And they needed that badly. They really did. Looking at the standings tonight and seeing Columbus, having them lose a game against New Jersey. Against New Jersey, or Vegas rather. I'm sorry, tonight. This was a big one for them. A big one for them. So I mean, they've got to get on board. The Rangers have really got to start doing something and getting some wins together here. But yes, this is massive for them. A massive win. And some guys that needed to start showing up showed up tonight. And some guys who really needed to start playing better played a little better tonight. But as we have along the ticker at the bottom, you can see the stats for the players on the ticker there. First, yes, first comment, welcome. So, yeah, this is a big night for the Rangers. Really is. Really big night. Capitals are playing Kings right now. It's really kind of inconsequential, but, Panthers and Leafs was a game to pay little attention to because Toronto and Ottawa and Lightning losing a shootout. So, I mean, one of those three teams, likely Tampa or Ottawa, is going to be a team that ends up maybe falling into the territory in which the Rangers can catch if this continues, especially Tampa, and they're in a little bit of a free fall right now. The Devils get a win over the Oilers. Like I said, the Blue Jackets, they lost before to the Golden Knights. They got trounced 4-0. And, so this was a big night for the Rangers. Very big night. Rangers are now at 70 points, tied with Columbus. Columbus has a game in hand. But, they're there. They're right there. And with Montreal winning last night, this is big. I know I keep saying the same word, but I can't really understate how big this is for this team. So, hey, what's going on for the chat, everybody? I see everybody in there. But yes, this is a big win for them. And like I said, some guys that really needed to step up tonight. Artemi Panarin's had a point streak, but he's needed to be more of a dominating factor. It's not the Artemi Panarin that we saw last year. Will Cooley puts up another point. Matt Rempe gets an assist on a big Johnny Brodzinski goal to put the Rangers ahead 2-1, which was kind of short-lived because now the penalty kill, which has been great, is kind of slipping a little bit lately in these last few games. So, but they go to overtime, and they managed to get their second overtime win of the season. They were 1-6, now they're 2-6, and Braden Schneider goes full Bobby Orr to make sure that the Rangers come out with the extra point. So he got third star of the game. And Igor Shesterkin, 26 of 28 saves, a .929 save percentage. He gets first star. I thought Kreider was okay. Noticeable, maybe. I thought he was okay. I didn't really think he was all that good. I still think he can give you more. Yeah, Bailey, another night where Rempe gets another reputation call against him. It's terrible. Killjoy saying the same thing, but it seems like every night there's something new. I mean, Winnipeg game was the worst I've seen with the officiating all year. And there's not really much that I could say about the officiating this year because this team has just been so bad. But that game was horrendous. That Winnipeg game was a joke. If they couldn't make it any more obvious than it already was, they did a great job of letting everybody know what side they were on Tuesday night. So, But yeah, the Rebbe interference call shouldn't have been called. It was incidental contact. It's another reputation call. And I'm with you on Carson Soucy. He's not looked good so far as a Ranger. He hasn't. I mean, he had his goal in his first game against Ottawa, but outside of that, he's not looked good. This is someone that they brought in to help kind of stabilize their left side a little bit. He hasn't done anything really to help that. And Calvin DeHaan, you're not going to play him anymore because he's just way too slow. He can't skate anymore. But I think that, the talks about how Vince Mercogliano was saying how they're locked into all 6 defensemen next year, I don't think they are. I really don't. I think a lot of changes will be made. I really hope that they go after Jacob Chikrin in the offseason. But, yeah, this is the big thing for me. They've been playing man-on-man for quite some time now, right? Why did that not change earlier on in the year? Why? The results that were happening were telling you that it was not good. Their efforts were terrible defensively. They looked disjointed terribly. And the D is just way too slow for it. You had Trouba back then who was slow, but Soucy might even be slower than him. And honestly, the structure is just, it's not there. That's why I think there needs to be a new voice. And I don't think Laviolette has all the team's problems, but something's got to change. And it's got to change from top to bottom. Get rid of that entire coaching staff. Get rid of the general manager. And get rid of a lot of these slow guys who are just incapable of moving a puck at like an even average level. So I don't think you can do what they're doing. The one thing I'll give Soucy is that in Vancouver, they played zone defense. So he's going from zone to man, and that's a tough transition to do in mid-season. So for all of Soucy's flaws, you do have to give him a little bit of credit and add some context here, because what they're doing right here with this man-to-man is not good enough. It's not working. It needs to change. But again, you do have really kind of 3 defensemen on this team right now that really are questionable defenders. Like Soucy is, and then you have Vakanainen, who for me, I really don't want Vakanainen in the lineup. I don't think he's good. And I think there's a portion of this fan base that has overhyped him for whatever reason. Oh, they saw him play okay at the Four Nations on a shitty Finland squad. Cool. Great. We're going to hype up another bad defenseman and act like he's any good. Awesome. Not like I haven't seen this in my near 30 plus years of watching this team. But you need to get better on the defensive side of things. And it's not just the D-corps. It's the forwards too. The forwards haven't helped. Artemi Panarin needs to be a little more involved. Alexis Lafreniere looked like he had a little more jump to his game, but I still need more from him. Mika Zibanejad looks better than he was earlier on in the year, but he's still not great. I don't know. I mean, I can see why you would call Panarin Hollywood. I mean, it looks like he's too afraid to get his hands dirty. And Panarin's always played better when he's had a guy that's been able to go in and get the pucks in the dirty areas. And that's why I thought Will Cooley on a line with him and Trocheck would really work well tonight. And Cooley played well. He did. But it's just Panarin has just not been good enough this year. I know people will talk about his point streak and everything like that, but do you really see the same Panarin you saw last year or the year before that? I don't know. I don't see it. I see a guy that's really kind of still afraid to go to the dirty areas when they go dump and chase. I mean, he doesn't really skate after the puck. Do I see any similarities between Pionk and Jones? No. Jones is a better skater, but Pionk has a better head for the game. Much better head for the game. Just give me 1 second. I just have to step away for just 1 second. Sorry. Sorry about that emergency there. But yeah, I don't see much of a similarity there. I'm really sorry there. It's a great skater, Jones, but he just doesn't have the defensive end of things. He doesn't. And I don't think that he's good enough defensively at this level. I really don't. He from time to time he'll make plays, and you'll be like, oh wow, maybe he couldn't be a defender, but he needs to be with a really strong defensive defenseman that can cover for a lot of his defensive gaffes. And he's not big enough or strong enough to handle bigger forwards at this level. So his play has got to be that he holds on to the puck more than anything. And that's the way that he has to play defense. It's kind of like Erik Karlsson. Karlsson really is not good enough in his own zone. He's probably better than Jones in that regard, but because he could still take the puck away from forwards, but it's not somebody you want running around in his own zone for any extended period of time without the puck, because he seems to get lost at times. I mean, even that one play where I think it was a power play and he had to get back and cover. I mean, he was really out of position when that play happened. And thankfully he got over and he made the play, but yeah. I mean, this is what I was saying before, DP. Yeah. Yeah, Kaylee, I know. I mean, this kind of goes to DP and what I said earlier on, though. Like, the transition from going from one style of play to the other, it's tough. It's tough to do mid-season. So, I mean, he's still trying to get adjusted. I don't know if he's a long-term answer there. I don't know if they see him there. I think it depends on what happens this offseason, but he is movable. Snarky, my backhand's actually pretty good, bud. Anybody who knows me personally knows that actually my backhand is, I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but backhand is always a shot that I've always worked on at a very young age for whatever reason, because I was told that you can beat goalies that way because it's harder to read. So I definitely, my backhand is actually pretty decent. Again, I get it. Susie hasn't been great, but he's also going from zone to man, and that transition, as I just said before, is really, really tough for a defenseman. Listen, I play defense. I've played a lot of man-to-man. I've played zone, and it's not easy to go back and forth between the two of them. It's not. With zone, there's more structure. With man-to-man, there's more chaos. And you're seeing it. Like, he's hesitant to be in certain positions at certain times because he's not really even sure of himself. He's not sure of this system yet, or the lack thereof, I would say. Yeah, I don't know how we won this game. Anthony, yeah, I said this on Twitter that this team might be the worst at getting shots on net from the point. I wish I could pull the analytics on it. Point shots blocked and point shots missed on the net. If there was some like efficiency number for it, the Rangers would have to be probably top the bottom three in the league. Like they're terrible at getting shots on net. Yes, this is true too, and that's a big part of man-on-man as opposed to zone. Injury, barring injury, Snarky, probably not. Probably not. Yeah, and stability is not what they have right now. They're icing. I mean, Miller is a competent NHL defenseman. Susie definitely lacks the foot speed for man-to-man. Miller is a competent defenseman. Morgan is a competent defenseman. Schneider is probably a 6. I don't know. I really don't know after that. Like a lot of that is borderline NHL defensemen after that. And you're not going to win games with borderline defensemen. Even if Fox comes back. Who gets booted down out of the lineup? You still have 2 other defensemen that really don't belong in an NHL roster. What they really need is EJ Emery and Drew Fortescue to come up and be competent NHL defenders sooner than later. And that's sad because you shouldn't be relying on a player in his draft plus 2 year and a player in his draft plus 1 year to be your future, sooner than later. So, no, I don't regret bashing Kuznetsov because Kuznetsov became a malcontent and ended up going back to the KHL. And Laviolette, I don't know if Laviolette is completely the problem. There's evidence that suggests that Drury is a bigger part of the problem than Laviolette. But I think we're at a point where a purge is needed from head to toe. So Keandre chips the puck too much. He can't pass out of the zone. His passing needs work. I'll tell you that. I mean, that overtime winner for Ottawa, nope. Shimmer is a great song. It's probably a top 3 favorite from Fuel for me. But I mean, that's a good one. I used it live because the Rangers are technically still alive after this. But yeah, I don't think this is necessarily a hot take, Nicole. I do think you're looking at the possibility of him developing into maybe a 5. And I mean, maybe a useful defender, but the defensive mistakes he was making were just boneheaded at times. Like he was just missing assignments left and right. And you're just like, wait, where is this? Because this guy was playing so good in preseason, and then his defense just went off a cliff. I am going to say that a part of that is likely the lack of a system here and then playing man-to-man instead of zone. I think in zone, he probably would have been a lot better. But you cannot play man-to-man. Just doesn't work. I don't understand how they think it works. And they have the personnel to think that it works. Like it's just, I totally get this. I totally get this. And that's part of the reason why with the decisions that are being made, I don't know if Drury is really qualified to make the next pick at head coach. Why does he get another chance? That's really, I mean, the argument you're going to have to make for him. When Fox comes back, it's going to be someone on the right side. So it's probably going to end up being Jones at that point. And yeah, you're definitely going to sit Jones for Fox. But I don't understand what they're doing with the rest of the defense because Susie hasn't looked good. He could play either side. I mean, you could put Jones and Schneider as a third pair and then have Miller and Borgen, and well, then you need Fox and Susie. I mean, are you going to put Vakanainen with Fox? No, I can't. I can't do that. Yes, they need to play better at even strength. I just don't understand how this team can kill penalties so well and just be ass everywhere else. So, I mean, the developmental staff needs to be overhauled. I've talked about that. Tanner Glass, Jed Ortmeyer, Mark Stahl. What are we doing here? What are we doing here? Well, let's please take some notes from Tampa Bay, Colorado, and Dallas, who actually know how to develop players. Drury does fire Laviolette. Yeah, he's next in the line of fire. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if it's up to me, I'd purge everything. Sam Bennett would be nice, but I think they're going to have other things that they're going to need to spend their cap on. Yeah, I understand the sentiment here. Drury cannot be general manager. I get it. I want to purge. I want to purge top to bottom. Like this group, yeah, you might be signifying to them, hey, that you're winning, but if you move some of the players that you have to move, and you get rid of the general manager and the coach, you know what? At that point, it's a purge, and nobody wins. Yeah, I've seen this sentiment, John. I've seen this. I don't know if that's necessarily the case. I wonder what they think of Dylan Garand by signing that extension. Do they think that he's not ready? Is that what it is? Do they want him to have more time? Like, how much more time can he have in Hartford? That's really what I wonder, because he's been there for a bit. He's been there for a bit. So I mean, he didn't start off great there. He's gotten better as time went on, but I mean, he's looked pretty good lately. He's been in Hartford regularly since 22-23. And he now has over 100 games in Hartford under his belt. So, I mean, he's got a .913 save percentage this year with a .277 goals against, which are his best numbers by far. He's 22 years old. When is he going to get the chance? Brother, love it. Who do we place Drury with? Now, this is the question. This is the question that needs to be answered. I don't know at this point. I don't know who's available. But I think you need to go outside of the organization, and it needs to be new blood. And I think a lot of people are going to say the same thing about the coaching as well. I think David Carl should be at the top of their list. But again, as Johnny Lazarus has said, why is David Carl going to leave a very cushy job in Denver where he's getting paid pretty well? I mean, the Rangers are probably going to have to throw a checkbook at him. So then that's going to lead to someone like Mike Sullivan, who, if Drury stays and fires Laviolette, that could be someone that they look at because there's familiarity there with this organization. And he's another guy from the Northeast. And, it's like an old boys club with these retreads. So do they go and they hire another retread in Sullivan? Yeah, I mean, it's very possible. I don't know who's available general manager wise. That's really the question. I mean, Sonny Mehta, if he is available, would be a very good hire. I mean, is he looking to leave? I mean, I haven't heard anything about this, but then again, there hasn't really been any talks about general managers circulating. I haven't. Oh, Quenville. Oh my God, no. Oh, man. There would be major backlash if Quenneville was hired. I think you would alienate a very good portion of this fan base by doing that. Because there are not a lot of people that like Quenneville right about now. And understandably so. Quenneville, I'm not going to get into everything that happened in Chicago, but Quenneville did not help out anything there. He didn't. And he definitely deserves a fair share of his responsibility. The issue is going to be is, one, is he going to be eligible? Two, will Bettman reinstate him? And I will say this. If there's somebody that can come in and command respect and get this shit to stop with the whining over the general manager and all this other stuff and not playing defense and not showing up, Quenneville commands that respect. So, I mean, that is the upside to him. He is one of the best coaches of all time, regardless of what anybody says about any other things that have happened. He's a Hall of Fame caliber coach. He won't get into the Hall of Fame because of his role and everything in Chicago, but he is a Hall of Fame caliber coach. No questions asked. That doesn't happen, he's in first ballot. So if you want to think from the mind of Dolan, and I'm sorry to keep going back to Brian, I know I see the other comments in the chat, but this is all kind of flowing along together in one conversation. So these are some good comments here. But if you're thinking of the mind of James Dolan, the one thing that we know about James Dolan is that he tends to kind of defer to minds and people who are greatly respected in the hockey world, like Glenn Sather, like Peter Laviolette. Like, if you have that type of track record, he's not going to get nearly as involved and hands-on when things go bad. And Babcock, he's another. There would be, I think Babcock is probably even worse off than Quenneville, because Babcock had his second chance and blew it before he even got the chance to really start his second act. I mean, I think Babcock is never coming back. I think that's it. He ruined any chance he had of a second chance in the NHL with all the stuff that happened in Columbus before last season even started. And it led to them being really dysfunctional last year and all the stuff that happened. And then Columbus has just been in a funk since then. But, I mean, they're in a playoff spot right now, so good. I mean, good for Columbus to get back to where they are, but also screw Columbus at the same time as a Ranger fan. So, yeah, but Meta, Peverly, Darsh, one of those guys. I mean, is Peverly really in a GM role right now? I haven't heard much about him. So I'm not going to talk a whole lot about some of these other guys. Bruce Boudreau, I mean, I'll tell you right now, he's a guy that if you want to turn around a team for a couple of seasons and get better production out of them offensively, that's a guy that you bring in. Like, if you have a solid defensive squad that can't score goals, then you bring in a guy like him. So, no, I didn't know where Peverly's title was at this point. I haven't really kept up. So if that's the case, then Peverly's probably being groomed to be that next guy. Anybody who follows Dragon Ball Super is probably looking at about Vegeta being basically trained to be the next destroyer god under Lord Beerus. So that's the analogy I can make there. Anthony, yeah, I agree. The ownership is an issue because Dolan gets very impatient. Again, I know people who have worked directly under Dolan, directly under him. And he cares a lot about his teams and his businesses and everything, but he can be very tough to work for because he is very demanding. And that is what I've been told by two people who have worked directly under him. And so I get it. I get it. I didn't think Ulf was really good or bad as a defense coach. I thought he was okay. I don't know if he's doing anything lately. So, but I haven't, again, really followed him too much. B-Rye, I saw this before. Is Sullivan even leaving Pitt? He might. Oh. Comment before about Ken Holland. This one. There's no Red Wings dynasty without Ken Holland. Ken Holland hasn't been the same Ken Holland in years, Bluegrass. That's why Brian before was like scared about Ken Holland. Very, very scared. Yeah, Housley hasn't been good here. And again, I don't get how they could play the 1-2-2 last year, see that works, and then get away from it. Were the players that adverse to playing the 1-2-2? Were they really that adverse to it? I know they fought it a bit last year from like mid-December until about the end of January. And then the Rangers went on that 10-game win streak that spilled over into the Stadium Series game. Ken Holland brought in Chris Knobloch, yes. But Ken Holland, his legacy in Detroit was close to being tarnished for what he did towards the end of that run. Ask any Red Wings fan about his last years in Detroit. And then the Oilers, like, he still hasn't improved their defense. He still hasn't done anything to address the goaltending. I mean, I honestly think you're giving him too much credit. I think you are looking at him the same way that people look at Lou Lamoriello and think that he's still a great general manager when he's not. Lou Lamoriello has not been a great general manager for a very long time. I mean, I would say the cap era has really been mediocrity for Lou Lamoriello. He gets to one Stanley Cup final, and the rest of Lou Lamoriello's post-cap era tenure has been mediocre at best. And I'm being nice there. I mean, Toronto got better after he left. Toronto got better when Shanahan started taking over. For me, Lamoriello is going to go into the Hall of Fame. No questions asked. But Lamoriello in the cap era is a far cry. And again, I'm being nice, from the guy that he was in the 90s and early 2000s. Him and David Conti in their scouting staff. I mean, he was the one who got Sikora and Eliash and brought in Rafalski from Europe and made all those great draft picks and international signings. And they just have not been the same. And Ken Holland has done kind of the same thing in Detroit. If you've really been watching, again, go speak to any Red Wings fan about this. And they'll tell you the same things what I'm telling you right now. Ever since Mark Lou's never been the same. Oh, man. I still can't believe Anthony actually pranked him with Lou Lamoriello's number. I've known, again, I've been friends with Anthony for 20 years now. This year is 20 years that I've been friends with him. And I've always known him to be a gigantic prankster. But I have never seen him pull anything like that. That's actually probably the best prank that I've ever seen him pull on somebody. And he's a bit of a smartass when it comes to stuff like that. He will get you eventually. But that's probably his greatest. So, and then I don't know if anybody knows about the Gold Star stuff or remembers the Gold Star stuff, how he had the deal with Romanov and Sorokin. And that got pulled because their agency saw Anthony rip Lou Lamoriello a new one 2 off seasons ago for not doing anything to improve the team. So that got squashed. Yeah, it's not just that. It's some of the. All right, I'm gonna have to go back to this because I'm gonna have to highlight this again. No Messier. Keep him in a studio. He has zero experience in a managerial position. That's just not a name that we should ever be mentioning for this. Until he comes up in some sort of capacity as a general manager or assistant general manager or some kind of consultant even within the organization or player development or something like that. No. Yeah, it's the horrible contracts. It's the bad trades that he made. The roster construction was terrible with Holland. Terrible in their final years. I mean, a lot of people will tell you, a lot of Red Wings fans will tell you that he is one of the big reasons as to why the playoff drought ended. Because he refused to continue to filter in new talent. Zubov influence will follow Messier forever. I mean, I really don't know what you mean there, but unless you're hinting at the Zubov trade and that Messier had something to do with it, which many believe that to be the case, but Messier is not a general manager. He's not a candidate. He's not somebody that they're going to look at. Chris Drury was being groomed to be the general manager for a while under Jeff Gordon. So that is understandable. But Messier has not been in any of those positions. And don't mention him for coaching either. Because he hasn't done anything coaching-wise at any level close to, like, even if he was like a major junior coach, I would say, okay, you know what? Maybe that's somebody that they could look at if he gets a little more experience at the minor league level. But no, there's no experience. You got to remember, John Cooper didn't just start in the AHL. John Cooper worked his way up. Like he worked his way up to the NHL level. If you want to take a look at what he did, he was in the NAHL with the Texarkana / St. Louis Bandits. And he was in there for 5 seasons as a head coach. He won the championship in his final 2 seasons. Then he gets promoted to the USHL with the Green Bay Gamblers. And that's a comparable junior league to the Canadian Hockey League. It's a step below that, but it's a comparable league. So he spends 2 seasons there, wins the championship in his second year. Then he goes to the AHL for the Norfolk Admirals. He loses in the playoffs in round 1, first year. Second year, wins the championship. Third year, he's coaching the Syracuse Crunch and gets called up as head coach middle of the year in 2012-2013 to replace Guy Boucher. And the rest is history with Cooper. So you've got to work your way up. I don't know. I don't know about that weight. Nope. He wasn't a good coach in the NHL. And yes, the Islanders weren't a great team, but they got to the playoffs under Capuano. And then they didn't under Waite. So, and they had pretty much the same team. Maybe even a better team if you include the fact that Barzal came back under Tavares as a second-line center or one of Calder. I like Pekka as an assistant. I just think that whoever's coming in new is going to bring in their guys. Yes, no Messier. Love Messier as a player, but there's no experience there otherwise. Yes, Bednar, Cooper, Sullivan, Trotz. They all have to start at some point. That's the point about Messier. There's none of that there. If you go look at Mark Messier's hockey DB profile, like there is nothing about him coaching. Nothing. Zero. It's just player stats. Because anybody who coaches and plays, their coaching stats get put at the bottom. Or you can even go on Hockey Reference. If you type in a player's name and he comes up as a coach, you'll see coaching results come up. So, no. And just, you got to stay away from Messier. Unless he puts in the time to become an executive and become a good executive and works his way up, then no. Otherwise, no. But even if he does that, he's not going to be ready for years for that. So that's not even an issue right now. That's not even a thought. Shouldn't even be a thought on anybody's mind right now. And yeah, this is the thing. Does he even want to? Because if you ask me, if I got paid 6 figures plus a year, or maybe even $1 million, he's probably maybe even getting 7 because of who he is. If you're getting 7 figures to be in a TV studio, why would you want to go and coach and be involved in the everyday stress and anxiety of coaching a team? No, Sean Avery, no, stop. Be right. Don't you manifest this negative energy on me. No, and no. Henrik Lundqvist is another one that doesn't have any experience in coaching. He's another one. No experience. He's in a studio role. And let him be in a studio role. He seems to have finally gotten comfortable with it. Yes, thank you. He wouldn't have done it 20 years later. He's in his 60s now. He's going to start in his 60s? Don't see it happening. Don't see it. Not one bit. I mean, I don't know. GM, again, he doesn't seem like the type. He has other endeavors in the fashion industry that he likes. So, yeah, I don't necessarily agree with this, but he doesn't have any experience. He has no experience in the field. Yeah, maybe Gordon Bombay can come in and help this team out. Or he can get Coach Riley from the Hawks. Yeah, I think Avery is another one. Again, you could say this. He would be in a front office right now if he wanted to be down the road, be a GM. I don't think he wants to be a GM, though. I think he'd be too brash in that role. I don't think he would do well with handling players. And I know he probably talks about players the way that he does in his videos because he's going with the shtick. But I see him as somebody that can get very hot-headed and bump heads with players. I think if a lot of people are complaining about Chris Drury and him having discussions with Panarin and calling out Kreider and Trouba and sending out those memos, I think Avery would be worse off. I don't think he would be a good fit personality-wise. I think his temperament is not good enough for it. And I like Sean Avery. I think as somebody who wants to be a personality, I mean, his content is funny. But I think personality-wise, in terms of player relations, I think it's tough to kind of put Sean Avery in that position. Oh, Sergei Fedorov. I don't think he'd want to leave Russia, though. I don't think him or Kovalov. And I know they both coach. I figured, but it's a name that I've actually seen other people say before, too. So it's not just you. Might as well throw a Ty Domi in the role. This is actually a really good question, Anthony. I'm not sure. I think Allaire is still there, but I think not having him around full time the way that he's been previously definitely does not help, because Allaire has kind of been Igor's like safety blanket once things start going wrong for him. He just slows everything down to a halt and goes back to everything. So yeah, Brian, I don't think either of them would go anywhere. I really don't. I like the idea of having new blood in, and especially with Kovalov being a Ranger, but they don't have. I don't think they have coaching records for KHL on Hockey DB. I know Fedorov is currently coaching. I believe Kovalov coaches the Kunlun Red Star. Oh no, they do. Fedorov, is he not coaching anymore? Because the only season it shows for Fedorov is CSKA Moscow from 21-22 and won the championship that year. Honest question, when's the last time I remember a Ranger team being this bad defensively? Wow, that's a good question. I don't know. I really don't know. I would say maybe the Dark Ages. I'd probably have to say the Dark Ages. I don't think any of the I don't think any of the teams that I've watched since the Dark Ages have been this bad defensively, except for this team. I mean, even the rebuilding years, they were a little better defensively than this, and you understood 20. Yeah, nah, not as bad as the Dark Ages. Not as bad as this or the Dark Ages. The Dark Ages were another story. I kind of wish some of you were old enough to understand how bad things were back then. We were icing guys like Sylvain Lefebvre, who was a shell of himself from his Colorado days. Stefan Quintal, who didn't want to be in New York. He wanted to go back to Montreal. Igor Ulanov. Brad Brown. Dale Purinton might be the worst defenseman I've ever seen in my life. Nobody will be. Dale Purinton was bad. He was really bad. And then he had criminal charges after his NHL career ended for armed robbery, I believe. Roman Endor was also really friggin' bad. Richard Lindner, Peter Smrek, like those guys were terrible. Tim Taylor was at least a good face-off guy and a decent fourth line center, but he had better days in Boston and Tampa Bay when he ended up winning the cup in 2004 with Tampa. But I mean, really, the 2001 Ranger team, they were playing well. They were like third or fourth in the conference in like November. And then December hit and they started going down. And they were at least like fifth or sixth by the time January hit. And then the Richter ACL injury going post to post on Steve Sullivan in Chicago in February. That happened, and that was it. That was it after that. And then Fleury went into substance abuse. And Fleury was one of the league's leading scorers before he went into substance abuse. He was right there with Sakic and Yager. Oh. Yeah, Dark Ages was terrible. It was terrible. That 2001 season was the only glimmer of hope outside of Pavel Bure's insane run after right after the 2002 trade deadline, when they got him for York and Philip Novak and that first round pick that ended up being, I believe, Peter Tadacek, who did nothing. He never played in the NHL. So Burry went on an insane run. No, because I think a lot of you younger fans really need to understand how bad things were back then. Like, there was a vibe. It was a country club vibe. Like, you think, like, everything was, like, you think everything is bad with this, and this was dysfunctional? Like, this is Kitty fucking Corral or Barney and Friends compared to how bad things were back then. Rich Pilon as a Ranger was awful. Awful. He was always somebody who played great against the Rangers. He was really not that good. But he played great against the Rangers. And then when he came to the Rangers, they tried to put him with Brian Leach after Booka Boom got sucker punched by Matt Johnson, December of 98 in LA. Yeah, we had players, kids playing mini sticks. You had Bobby Holik calling out the organization in the press every other day. I don't know why they signed me to be a first-line center. I'm not a first-line center. They gave him 5 years and $45 million. 5 years, $45 million to be a second-line center behind Lindros. Probably the worst contract ever given, and they got out of it because of amnesty buyouts. Yes, that was at the 04 deadline. That was when Sather went to Dolan and said, you have to take your hands off. I have to rebuild. And that was it. And then you had this era of prosperity came because of that. Yes. And then Lindros, Holik, and Barnaby was also a first line at one point. Yeah. Yeah, the Flames can't get Simon as a liner because he's in Ranger shape. Yes, that was actually true. That was actually true. That was a narrative. That was something that was being said about the Chris Simon trade to Calgary at the 04 deadline, was that he was not in shape because nobody gave a shit in New York. No one at that time. Lindros was concussed. He played a full season in 03, but he played scared. Had like 50 points. Bure's knees were done after 03. He had that last knee injury, and that was it. Nedved got dealt. Dvorak got dealt. Checkmates were completely broken up. They tried Checkmates Part 2 with Jágr, Dvorak, and Nedved, but that deal didn't happen because Sather fell asleep on the job and basically ignored Craig Patrick. So that was a deal that almost happened in July 2001. And you would have had Jágr over Lindros. So, amazing speed. I'll never forget his 4-goal game against the Islanders in 2001. That was one of the big reasons why he had a 30-goal year that year. He had a 4-goal game against the Islanders towards the end of the year. And that helped push him over 30. Yeah, Lindros before and after the concussions was sad. Lindros was playing so well that first year in New York. He was over a point per game. Fly line was one of the best lines in the league. And then they go to San Jose in December of 01. And he has this slight collision with Mark Smith and suffers another concussion. It's a very slight concussion, but it's another. Yes, I remember this. And do you remember why they nixed that trade? If anybody hasn't heard this story yet, you could probably Google the articles because I've done so, and it's because they negotiated TV rights as part of the trade. TV rights and percentages. And Gary Bettman said, nope. It wasn't just the money. It was TV rights. Because they were being broadcasted on Fox Sports New York. It was the craziest shit ever. They had a better deal going to the Islanders, the Rangers did, than what the Kings gave them, even though Jason Blake ended up being part of that deal. But that deal got nixed because TV rights were being traded in that deal. And Gary Bettman was like, no, fuck that. Actually, it's funny because I'll there's almost traded for Sigmund Palffy. So if you go and if you Google something like Rangers almost traded for Zygmunt Palffy, one of the first links that come up is a New York Times one from June of 1999, and it actually explains it in there. It's crazy. I was like 13 or 14 when that happened. I don't think it wasn't 1997. I don't think it was 1997. 2001, I remember hearing some stuff about Keith Tkachuk and the Rangers. I remember there was supposedly a deal that the Rangers and the Coyotes were working on, and I think it was supposed to send Tkachuk and Hobby Bulin to the Rangers before the 2001 trade deadline. It was Brendan Shanahan, I think, was 1997. The Rangers were in on him back then. No, if you look up Keith Tkachuk almost traded to Rangers, looks like the Brady Tkachuk articles all come up. So, yeah. Trottier was the coach 2002, 2003, but he didn't even make it through the full season. Sakic wasn't going anywhere in 2001. It was Brendan Shanahan in 97. That I can tell you for sure. In 98, supposedly they were trying to go after Fedorov, but Carolina was really the front runner for Fedorov in 98 because they were going to offer sheet him in 98. But the Sakic offer sheet was 97. There's a whole special on that involving Air Force One. It's called Saving Sakic. It's actually really good. I would watch it. But Hull was actually almost a Ranger in 2001. The Rangers were one of the teams that were in the Brett Hull hunt because after they couldn't get the Yager deal done, they pivoted and they were going to go get Brett Hull. But he ended up signing with Detroit. I remember watching ESPN News and ESPN Nightly back in that summer of 2001, looking up NHL rumors. And yes, he did. This is actually true. Trottier hand wrote an essay. There was an interview about it that I watched and years and years ago. But yes, he hand wrote an essay about why he should be the coach. And that won Dolan and Sather over. But Shanahan was not available in 01. Shanahan was 97. There's actually, if you guys ever come across, I think it's Rangers Fan 819, I think it is. Hold on, I would have to look this up. It's a channel I watch a lot of old YouTube, old games on. He actually posts full old games. It's actually a great channel if you're ever feeling nostalgic and you want to watch like almost any era of Rangers hockey. But let me see. Yeah, Rangers Fan 819 on YouTube is the channel. And he posts all old games. I was watching a game from early 97, I believe, early 96, 97. It was Rangers and Flyers. And Sam and JD were talking about, JD was actually talking about the rumor of Shanahan being available because he was like, he's not going to stay in Hartford. And that was the word that were going around. The Rangers were linked to him, but didn't get it done. So, yeah, that was definitely Shanahan in 97. Not Tkachuk. I don't remember what the score was, But I'll tell you right now, it was, I definitely remember, because I didn't hear this before that. I didn't know about that. And then I was like, wait, they were in on Shanahan back then? It's like Shanahan back then would have been a force. If they would have gotten Shanahan in 1997, if they would have gotten him back then. No, it wasn't a March game because Shanahan was dealt to Detroit a lot earlier in the year than that. Like if you look at Shanahan's game logs, he was dealt. Or let's see, even his transactions will probably tell you it. Okay, October 9th, 1996, traded by the Hartford Whalers with Ryan Glynn to the Detroit Red Wings for a first-round pick in 1997, and ended up being Nikos Celios, Paul Coffey, and Keith Primo. That's a big deal. I don't know what they would have sent. Yeah, you would need hours on end for the Dark Ages. You really would. You really would, because there's a lot to cover in this. And it all starts with the Messier, well, I'm going to call it the lowball offer, because they didn't want to match. They didn't want to give Messier 3 years and $18 million for a guy who was declining, a guy who had been hurt in 96, 97. It would be, yeah. It was 7 years no play. You got to remember, my last recollection until I was about 20 years old of NHL playoffs was Eric Lindros water skiing past Mark Messier and shooting a puck into an open net. Yeah, the Keenan Skrudland deals didn't work out. They needed guys like Keenan Skrudland, but it just didn't work out. And then Keen collides with LaFontaine in practice and gives him his final concussion. And that's it. And his career was done. And LaFontaine was a pivot because they let Messier go. They didn't want to deal. They didn't want to give Messier his money. And then they whiffed on the Sakic offer sheet because Colorado matched it. And they pivoted to LaFontaine because there was no one else available at that point. And while LaFontaine was still pretty good for them, he was almost a point per game. He had over 60 points on only, I think 67 games. But it just, you were relying on Kevin Stevens, who was in his drug days back then, to be a top six left winger. They thought he could rekindle his Pittsburgh days playing Wayne Gretzky and Alexei Kovalev. That didn't work. Or Pat LaFontaine. And they didn't have it. They would have had Kevin Stevens 5 years earlier, then yeah, Kevin Stevens would have been really good, but he was just not the same player at that point. He was all sorts of fucked up at the time, and he was just not the same. And it's sad because Kevin Stevens was one of the best power forwards I've ever seen in my life. If Chris Kreider played with an edge and hit people and had a mean streak, he would be Kevin Stevens. He'd be Kevin fucking Stevens, no doubt. No doubt. Because Chris Kreider has that type of talent. Stevens was a great, great scorer. And I know a lot of people say, oh, I play with Mario Lemieux. Yeah. Then why isn't everybody that played with Mario Lemieux the 50-goal, 110, 120-point player? Why didn't Rob Brown last with Mario Lemieux? Robitaille for sure. Robitaille. It's not even a question. And Robitaille had a decent 97 season, but he just wasn't the same outside of LA for whatever reason. I don't know what it was, but it was something about him playing in LA and being where he could be the guy where he was better. Amazing. He leaves the Rangers. He goes back to LA. 98 is kind of a meh year. And then 1999, he has this resurgence, and you're just like, what the fuck? Like, really? You're just sitting there, and you're like, you couldn't have done this with us. You couldn't have done this with us. It's just amazing. I don't understand it. 90. He had 69 points in his first year in 77 games, 48 points in 69 games in his second year with the Rangers. And then he goes back to LA, 57 games, 40 points in 98. 99, 39 goals, 74 points. 2000, 36 goals, 74 points in 71 games, over a point per game. 2001, 34 years old, 37 goals, 88 points. I think he was like 6th in NHL scoring that year in points, 6th or 7th. Just crazy to think about. I'm actually looking it up right now to see because I'm actually curious where he was. Sorry, he was 11th. He was 11th. Kovalev and Straka and Jason Allison were tied for 4th, 95. Bure had 92, but he led the NHL with 59 goals in 7th. Doug Weight had his other big year with 90 points. Peter Forsberg had 89 points in only 73 games. Same with Zygmunt Palffy. Funny enough, Zygmunt Palffy was actually leading the NHL in scoring for a while. It is 12:22 a.m. here. Actually, no, it's not. My laptop time is ahead. Sorry. It is 12:14 a.m. here. Yeah, Neil Smith does not like the Nordstrom deal. He actually said that with us when he was on with us. So. Yeah, Hyman's a different story. Hyman's not a Kevin Stevens type. Hyman couldn't skate like Stevens. Hyman couldn't shoot like Stevens. He's a bit more of a McDavid merchant. It's Matthias Nordstrom. Six in the morning for you, Leo? Jeez. Wow. I'm probably going to do... What time is it right now? I'll go to 12:30. I'll go to about... You know what? It is getting late. We'll do another 10 minutes. So, because it is getting late here. The game was interesting. It's exciting. A better game than some of these other boring games that they've lost in. If you didn't see Schneider's overtime winner, it's pretty nice. I would go check that out. One of the highlights of the game is now everybody knows how hot Johnny Brodzinski's wife is. Ooh, this is a very good question. Trocheck was a decent defensive center. I guess you're laughing at my comment about Brodzinski's wife. I'm not the only one thinking it. I'll tell you that right now. It's all over Twitter, all over the place. I'll never forget when New York Rangers fans had MILF Mania going with Derek Stepan's mom. Derek Stepan's mom, and I think his sister too, were like the talk of the town for months when Derek Stepan debuted, when he had that hat trick. They showed his sister and his mom, and all the Ranger fans were like going, I remember on HF boards, everybody was going crazy over Stepan's mom. Yeah. Oh, his wife is very good looking too. Barkley Goodrow. Good job, Barkley. Good job. Yeah, Chris, that line could possess the puck like no other. They could cycle so well. and Yager was so dominant. I mean, for nostalgia purposes, I probably would have to go to them. But Vincent Trocheck was a better defensive center than either Straka nor Nylander. So, yes, and that is a fact. That is a fact. He did steal it from Max Domi. So, but yeah, that Nylander, the Yager and Friends line, as I used to call them. This I do not remember, but I heard that Roman Hammerlich's wife was very hot. I don't know about top 5. I hated Yager before he came to the Rangers. I hated it. I didn't like the way that he handled Lemieux coming back in Pittsburgh. I didn't like the way that he handled things in Washington. I was not a fan of him. It was an incredible talent to watch. But the way that he handled things in those two spots in those last 3 years before the lockout, last 3 or 4 years, I didn't like that. I was lurking on HF back then. I was on hockeytraderumors.com when that happened. Least favorite coach during the dark ages? Probably have to say Trottier. He was just not good at it. He was a better assistant. He won a cup as an assistant in Colorado in 2001. I liked Ron Lowe more than I liked Muckler, who ruined Malhotra. Tortorella Part 1 didn't really work. He was there for too short of a time to really gauge him. He was the interim for when Muckler got fired. He was the assistant. That's why. Torts or you talking about Trottier? You know what? You could be talking about Trottier there, and I thought Torts just because I thought it could be a typo. So Quinn, by far Quinn. I haven't seen many dumber coaches than David Quinn. I haven't. So, okay, you were talking about Trottier. All right, fair enough. I hope you could see that just transposing 2 letters could make that completely different. You could be talking about Torts. So that's why I thought that. But it's out of these, Quinn. And yes, he did. I would take Ron Lowe over Quinn any day of the week. I would absolutely take Ron Lowe over Quinn. And Ron Lowe did not have nearly as good of a team as Quinn had. Quinn had talent to work with. He was just an idiot. Gallant was probably a better coach than Rennie. Rennie was another one that really couldn't make adjustments, but Rennie didn't have great teams either. So, yeah, because Rennie wouldn't say shit to Yager. That was the thing. The team needed to go in a different direction from Yager because Yager kind of had a chokehold on everything. Yes. How close? That's to be debated. But Scotty Bowman was one of the guys that the Rangers were looking at, that Neil Smith was looking at bringing in. If you watch the road to victory, the 1994 Stanley Cup, take care, Leo. If you watch that video, they talk about bringing in Scotty Bowman at that point in 1994. Hitchcock was a little later. I think that was in the early 2000s. If I remember correctly, that was in the early 2000s. Rennie got, I will agree with you here. Rennie got a decent amount, out of what was not a great roster. It really wasn't. It was not a great roster at all. I remember the first year they were running Yager and Friends line, and then they ran Steve Ruchin, Marcel Hossa, and Marty Ruchinski. Marty Ruchinski actually had 55 points in 55 games for the Rangers. He was a point per game on a second line with the corpse of Steve Ruchin centering him, and Marcel Hossa, who, if Marcel Hossa would have played today, he probably actually would have been a good player. He was a guy that he just was bored at the wrong time. He really was. Because tweeners now, you can get by as a scoring winger on a third line and not have to be a traditional checker. Back then, you had to have traditional checking players on those bottom six roles. Like your Jay McClements, your Jay Pandolfos, your John Maddens, so the guys like that, guys that were out there specifically just to defend, Wes Waltz, guys like that, those guys filled out bottom six roles back then. They weren't meant for possession. Detroit was the only team that actually philosophized having guys that could really maintain puck possession in the bottom six. The rest of the teams, they didn't care as long as they blocked shots, they defended, and they kept the puck out of the net. It was a completely different philosophy back then, and Detroit was ahead of everybody. They were light years ahead of everybody because Jim Devellano went to the Russians and watched their style of play and was fascinated by the way that they played. Holmstrom actually got into a top six role a lot earlier than people think. There were a lot of times where he was playing with Steve Yzerman and Brendan Shanahan, or Steve Yzerman and sometimes Darren McCarty or Marty LaPointe would be up with them. You know, Marty LaPointe was a guy who got shifts with Yzerman. Yzerman's scoring fell off not only because of the fact that he bought in defensively to what Bowman was preaching and bringing to him because he wanted to win, was because he wasn't playing with as talented forwards in some of his later years. 2001, 2002 was a different story because he fucking tore his ACL and played the rest of the season through a torn ACL. He was playing on one knee. And he won an Olympic gold medal and a Stanley Cup on one friggin' knee. Like, that's how good Steve Yzerman was. He was almost a point per game that year because of the talent they had on that team. But leading up to that year, there were some guys that really didn't belong playing with him. So Holmstrom really wasn't a checker by any means. He worked his way up into a top six role somewhat quickly because they would use him as a net front menace type presence. But Bowman at one point, they were looking into him. They couldn't get him, but they were looking into him. Neil Smith wanted him. And then they went, Checketts wanted Keenan. Keenan wanted control. And that's the problem. The coach and the general manager have to be on the same page. And I really do wonder if Laviolette and Drury are on the same page with a lot of these things. Because it just seems like Drury's bringing in guys for certain reasons. And Laviolette doesn't want to play them. And I don't know. Something seems really off with the connection between the two of them. All right, I'm going to do like 3 more minutes. I'm going to sign off at 12:30. So, yeah, I mean, these guys are important. Don't get me wrong. Your Travis Mowens, your Ryan Carters. Ryan Carter, we actually interviewed. I hated Ryan Carter, the devil. I really did. But we interviewed Ryan Carter on here a few years ago. Nice guy. But yeah, those guys are important, but you have to find a balance. You can't just forsake skill for guys like that. And the Rangers have been guilty of that at times over the years. And this year, too. So, I mean, the only thing I'll say is the Buchnevich trade. I think partially that happened because they wanted to go get Eichel. And they wanted to have space for Eichel. And then Drury didn't want to deal Hedel, Kravtsov, Nils Lundqvist at a first for Eichel. Man, that's probably Drury's worst move, is not pulling the trigger on the Eichel deal. And I said it back then, just let him go get the surgery and he's going to be fine. And no, because Peyton Manning did. Peyton Manning was able to come back. He had surgery. How much overall change? I see a lot of change coming. Chris Kreider's gone. I wouldn't be shocked if one of Mika Zibanejad or Artemi Panarin's gone. Yeah. No, No. You give up the talent to get somebody that good. You give up because center depth wins. Center depth absolutely wins. You give up the talent to go get him. Here's the issue. Does he waive? I think, personally, knowing what we know about the conversation that Drury had with him prior to the start of last season, I would say he's probably going to have another with him after this year. Because if he had a conversation with him after that Devils series, that offseason, man, he's probably going to have one with him after this season because this has not been a real good year for Panarin. I don't think Zibanejad was ever included in that deal for Eichel. I never heard anything about that. They were supposedly some rumor, but none of the insiders had that as happening. But I'll tell you right now, Panarin is somebody that Drury's probably going to talk to. And if Drury reads him the writing on the wall and tells him, hey, we're not going to re-sign you after this year. Do you want to go someplace now and give yourself a chance to set up and maybe with a team that you might want to re-sign with and relocate your family now as opposed to doing it next year? Maybe Panarin waives at that point. Maybe he does. All right, so aside from Yanni Gourde, what? And again, I don't think rentals were even on Drury's mind, and I don't think they were ever going to trade for rentals. And a lot. I mean, Vince even said that you're likely not going to see them trade for rentals, and I understand that. I mean, yes, maybe you have to punt the season, but was McLeod really available? Was McLeod really available? That's the thing. I don't think he was. You got Miller. I hate Drury, but that I wanted Gourde too. But were you really going to give up? All right, so what Seattle got back for those two was pretty impressive. Did you really want to give that up to get Gourde? Because I didn't. Yeah, I figured that out as soon as I saw. Sorry. Yeah, I figured you were talking to John once today. Yeah, and this is really it. He was in a damned if you do, damned if you don't. It's just a weird situation. Honestly, this is the weirdest situation I've ever seen this team in come deadline. Because they weren't good enough to buy rentals, at least. If you can make hockey trades, okay, you make hockey trades, bring in players with term, make something that has some sort of lasting impact with this team. But they couldn't even do that because there was just nobody available that fit that. Who was available that fit that? I mean, you bring up McLeod. Okay. Listen, I love Ryan McLeod. I think Ryan McLeod is like the perfect third line center. I don't think you could find a better third line center than him. He kills penalties. He gives you offense. He's good defensively. What else do you want from a third line center? Yanni Gourde, when he's healthy and he's productive, gives you 45 points and gives you good two-way play, and he's an agitating type pest. Yanni Gourde is the other guy I would look at. So, I don't. All right, I'll tell you this right now, and this is just from what I'm gathering. This is just my gut. This is just, again, completely from what everything I've gathered and the way that this team has kind of wanted to build itself up as, and just other beat writers saying some things along the line, but they want meat and potatoes. They want more north, south, and less east, west. And Trevor Zegras is like the antithesis of what they are looking for. So I do not expect Trevor Zegras to be a Ranger. I think he is very, very low, if not at the very bottom of players that they would target. This is a fair point. We know Adams and Drury don't have a great history. So, yeah, it's very possible. I think Peterka – okay, so I watched Lance Lisowski, who was the one that first started that rumor, on Jeff Marek's The Sheet, Jeff Marek's podcast. And he said that JJ Peterka was not happy. And I watched his segment on there specifically to see if there was any further words about JJ Peterka. Peterka's not happy in Buffalo. He is not happy there. So I wonder if that's something that they can revisit in the offseason. Maybe, I don't know who goes the other way, but maybe that would be something that they would revisit in the offseason. Just my opinion. Just my thoughts. I have no sources, nothing further to kind of, pull that along. I really don't have anything else there. But I do know that Lance Lisowski said that JJ Peterka is very unhappy in Buffalo. So he's probably dealt this offseason. Maybe it is Lafreniere. Maybe it's a change of scenery. Who knows? Maybe Brady Tkachuk becomes available. Again, I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm not even trying to manifest anything. Maybe Brady Tkachuk is secretly unhappy and is, behind the scenes, he's not happy with what's going on. But I think these are things that are revisited come this offseason. Ottawa making the playoffs would probably go a long way to keeping Brady Tkachuk happy. I'll tell you that. But, I mean, if he becomes available, the Rangers are going to be right near the top of that list of teams trading for him. But I am going to cut this off here. I actually went 7 minutes over what I said I was going to do. So I'm going to cut this off here. Thank you all for joining. Appreciate it. Everyone in the comment section keeping this interesting. Thank you so much. Love the input. Love the conversation. maybe the Dark Days will be something that I will do at another point in time. So if anybody really wants to be in on that, I will try to put something together. It'll take a lot of work and time with that. Yeah. It's a soft tampering. Oh, God. Oh. Michael and Lauer, I hope you're watching, even though I know you're not. But I hope you're watching, just so I can piss you off. No. But again, thank you, everybody. Maybe we'll do a Dark Ages one. Yes, maybe I'll see you at Croker's sometime, Mikey. So, a Dark Days Cope session would be very fun. Any of the younger fans that want to learn a little bit about it, would be a fun discussion. Thank you all. Appreciate all of you. Have a good night, and maybe if I'm around over the weekend, maybe I'll do another one over the weekend, but depends if I'm home for either of those games. So take care, everybody. Have a good night, and don't drink yourself into utter stupidity watching this team. I don't know what else to say. I got nothing. Night, everybody.